If you're just joining us, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. A fleeting moment can ignite our passion to weave even more tales. Kindly give this video a thumbs up, and now, let's dive into the tale. Never did I imagine that my life would veer in such an unexpected direction. Reflecting on the past, I often find myself questioning how events unfolded as they did. I was an ordinary wife, navigating what I believed to be a typical, secure life alongside my husband, Mark. After 7 years of marriage, life had its ups and downs, but I never envisioned that I would find myself recounting this tale one day. Mark was employed at a sizable corporate firm, a position that ignited his enthusiasm, yet also consumed the majority of his time. He constantly sought validation, relentlessly striving for the next significant advancement. I found his ambition and drive truly admirable. Yet, at some point, his work took precedence. What about our marriage? It simply turned into yet another item on his list of tasks. I worked as a freelance graphic designer from home, allowing me plenty of time for myself. Initially, it was pleasant. The tranquility was delightful, allowing me the freedom to craft my own timetable. Yet, as time passed, a sense of loneliness crept in. I longed for genuine dialogues and significant bonds. Mark and I hardly exchanged words these days. Whenever we spoke, the conversation revolved around bills, his job, or our grocery list. What happened to the spark we once shared? Departed. And then I encountered Jonathan. Jonathan held the position of authority over Mark. I had come across his name previously in a casual mention. Mark expressed his thoughts about him, blending admiration with a hint of frustration. He was the type of leader who drove his team relentlessly, demanded excellence, yet also recognized and rewarded those who excelled. He was a figure in the field, someone who commanded respect and, truthfully, instilled a sense of fear. Our initial encounter took place at a company event. Mark had finally received his long-awaited promotion. A lavish celebration dinner took place at an upscale restaurant in the heart of downtown. I found myself uncertain about whether I wanted to attend. At that stage in our marriage, I sensed a shift. I felt more like a roommate than a partner. Yet, I adorned myself in a dress, styled my hair, and embraced the role of the encouraging partner. Upon our arrival, the restaurant was alive with the vibrant energy of its patrons. Mark made the introductions, offering firm handshakes and engaging in light conversation. Then he made the introduction to Jonathan. Jonathan was in his mid-40s, exuding a confidence that effortlessly commanded the attention of everyone around him. His piercing blue eyes commanded attention, exuding a formidable presence. As he grasped my hand, his eyes lingered on mine just long enough to create a sense of recognition. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman who stands beside him," he remarked with a grin. I chuckled with decorum. After hearing Mark discuss work so frequently, I felt as though I was already familiar with Jonathan. The dialogue progressed rapidly. Before long, other executives whisked Jonathan away. Yet throughout the night, I remained unable to dispel the sensation of his gaze upon me. In the aftermath of that night, Jonathan didn't occupy my thoughts, at least not initially. However, a few weeks later, Mark invited me to accompany him to another company dinner. He expressed some reluctance, claiming it was merely a casual gathering. Yet, I understood his true intention. He was reluctant to venture out on his own, yet he didn't seem particularly excited about my company either. I went regardless. And that was the moment when everything truly began. During the dinner, Jonathan and I found ourselves sitting close together. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly. In contrast to Mark, who hardly inquired about my work these days, Jonathan showed a true curiosity. He inquired about my design endeavors and the intricacies of my creative journey. He instilled in me a sense of purpose regarding my craft. It was invigorating. As the night drew to a close, an unsettling realization washed over me. I found myself relishing his presence more than was perhaps appropriate. It began modestly from that point onward. A warm note on LinkedIn, sharing thoughts about one of my projects. A brief email inquiring whether I could suggest a graphic designer for his company. Next, a proposal for coffee to talk about business matters. I reassured myself that it posed no danger. Ultimately, Mark was perpetually occupied, leaving little room for a coffee catch-up with me. What was the trouble in having a simple chat? Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware. I realized I was anticipating these moments with Jonathan more than was perhaps wise. I felt a flutter of anticipation with each buzz of my phone, secretly wishing it was him on the other end. I was aware that my attire was shifting, that I was focusing more on my appearance, and I recognized that I was stepping over a boundary. Emotional affairs have a way of creeping into your life when you least expect them. What begins as simple exchanges, lighthearted moments, and common passions. You convince yourself it's trivial, merely a companion, merely a coworker, merely someone who gets you. Yet, in an instant, it dawns on you that you're harboring secrets. You're glancing at your phone from the adjacent room. You're erasing messages before your husband has a chance to read them. And you ponder, how did I arrive at this moment? I recall the initial occasion when Jonathan and I encountered each other beyond the confines of our professional lives. He extended an invitation to me for the opening of an art gallery. He understood my deep affection for art, recognized it as my true passion. Mark, naturally, found himself too occupied to attend, trapped at the office once more into the late hours. I decided to go. I reassured myself that it was merely an excursion, that it held no significance. Upon my arrival, I found Jonathan already present, patiently awaiting my arrival. His smile lit up the moment when our eyes met, carrying an unusual warmth. The evening was flawless. He strolled alongside me, absorbing my words about the fragments, offering his own reflections in return. He acknowledged my presence. And therein lay the issue, for Mark hadn't evoked that feeling in me for years. That evening, upon returning home, I lingered in the threshold of our bedroom, observing Mark as he focused intently on his laptop, completely unaware of my presence. I felt compelled to share with him the experience at the gallery, the deep conversations Jonathan and I had about art, creativity, and the essence of life itself. Yet I refrained, for I understood, beneath the surface, that he would remain indifferent. And that understanding stung deeper than anything else. That was the night I understood I was in deep waters, the night I recognized this wasn't merely a casual friendship, it was something far more significant. I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wanted to bring it to a halt. I ought to have put an end to it. I understand that now. I ought to have seen the warning signs, how my emotions were evolving, how I began to yearn for Jonathan's company in a manner that transcended mere friendship. Yet, in that moment, I convinced myself that my actions were justified. In the end, nothing had transpired. Not quite. That's what I continually reminded myself. Yet, emotions have a way of disregarding reason. They disregard lines and boundaries entirely. They slip in silently, filling the voids left behind. And just like that, they seize control. I began to spend more time with Jonathan. Initially, it was consistently accompanied by some sort of justification. A professional meeting, a relaxed coffee break, an art event he was sure would captivate me. And each time I reassured myself that this wasn't an affair, it was merely a connection with someone who understood me, someone who listened, someone who cared, someone who wasn't Mark. Mark seemed to be drifting further from my grasp, and I doubted he was even aware of it. Our exchanges were growing briefer, lacking depth. He was engulfed in his tasks, perpetually glued to his phone, constantly discussing the upcoming project, the next opportunity. On a particular evening, I made an attempt. I genuinely put in my best effort. I prepared dinner, a dish I was certain he would enjoy. I arranged the table, stowed my phone, and resolved that this evening we would engage in conversation. We shall establish a connection. Yet, upon arriving home, he hardly lifted his gaze from his device. He mumbled a vague greeting before taking a seat, his attention consumed by the emails he scrolled through while eating. I made an effort to initiate a dialogue, inquired about his day, and suggested activities we might enjoy together over the weekend. His responses were brief, curt. Suddenly, during dinner, his phone chimed. "Apologies, I need to take this call," he remarked, rising from his seat. And in an instant, he vanished. I lingered in silence, gazing at the vacant chair opposite me, my meal remaining untouched. In that instant, a profound change stirred within me. Reaching for my phone, I navigated to my messages and sent a text to Jonathan. It was merely a straightforward message, nothing untoward, just a remark about an art exhibit I had come across online, something I believed he would value. In mere moments, he responded. In an instant, solitude was a thing of the past. That evening, I found myself awake into the late hours, exchanging messages with Jonathan. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly, just as it always had. We engaged in a conversation about creativity, existence, our aspirations, and our challenges. He inquired about my work, my aspirations, and before I realized it, I found myself sharing thoughts I hadn't even acknowledged within. I felt unseen, merely going through the motions of existence rather than truly living. It left me questioning when my marriage shifted from a partnership to a sense of obligation. He listened without judgment, simply embracing the understanding that flowed between them. The following day, he extended an invitation for lunch. I paused, contemplating my next move. I was aware of where this was heading, yet I chose to go regardless. We gathered at a quaint eatery in the heart of the city, a serene spot adorned with gentle lighting and soothing melodies. There was a sense of closeness in our conversation, despite its simplicity. Jonathan had a pleasant presence that made him enjoyable to be with. He brought joy to my day, made me feel intriguing, as if my thoughts held significance. His gaze upon me was unlike any other. It wasn't the way Mark gazed at me, lost in thought and removed. It was brimming with intrigue and focus. After lunch concluded, he escorted me to my vehicle. And then, he performed an action that made my heart race. He leaned in and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. It was a mere flicker of kindness, delicately understated. Yet it seemed to encompass all that mattered. I ought to have stepped back, I ought to have spoken up. However, I did not. Instead, I gazed up at him, my breath hitching in my throat. And for the first time, I understood that this was more than mere friendship. This was an entirely different experience, one filled with peril, and I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wanted to bring it to an end. That evening, slumber eluded me. I found myself lost in that moment, recalling the gentle touch of his fingers on my skin and the rapid beat of my heart in my chest. A sense of guilt washed over me. I certainly did. Yet, I also experienced a profound sense of vitality. And that frightened me more than anything else. The upcoming weeks passed in a haze. We continued to cross paths, always discovering reasons to converse, to gather. It was perpetually pure. That was the mantra I repeated to myself. Midday meals, steaming cups of coffee, and deep discussions about aspirations, memories, and the weight of past choices. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the unfolding reality. One evening, Jonathan reached out to me. "Do you have some time available?" he inquired. I paused. The residence of Mark. A stillness lingered on the other end, followed by a soft exhale. He expressed a simple desire. "I just wanted to see you." And something within me shattered. I wanted to see him as well. I was fully aware that I was dancing with danger. I was acutely aware that I was putting it all on the line. Yet, I found myself unable to halt. On that fateful night when everything unraveled, I realized I had crossed a line. For weeks, I found myself navigating two distinct realms. In one, I was Mark's wife, the woman he hardly acknowledged, the one who smiled at dinner parties and feigned that everything was all right. In the other, I inhabited a completely different persona. A person who experienced recognition, who sensed their significance, who felt desired. Jonathan and I had never crossed a tangible boundary, yet emotionally, we had ventured beyond the point of no return. We maintained a steady connection, seizing opportunities to meet, revealing aspects of ourselves that perhaps should have remained private. I repeatedly reassured myself that my actions were justified. As long as I kept my feelings in check, I wasn't truly betraying Mark. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware. One evening, Mark returned home earlier than usual. I found myself perched on the couch, my phone cradled in my hands, engaged in a text conversation with Jonathan. The conversation consumed me completely, leaving me oblivious to the sound of the front door opening. Unbeknownst to me, Mark stood there, observing my every move. "Whom are you addressing?" His voice caught me off guard, and I clumsily tried to secure my phone. However, the moment had passed. Mark was far from foolish. He noticed how I had transformed, how my smile for my phone outshone the one I offered him, how my mind wandered even in his presence. "Just a friend," I replied hastily, though my voice trembled. "A friend," he reiterated, his gaze sharpening. "You've always stood out, haven't you? Remote. Perpetually glued to your device, perpetually absent." I let out a strange chuckle. "Mark, you're just letting your imagination run wild." Yet he was not. In his eyes, I could perceive the doubt, the pain. That evening, he left his phone untouched. He stayed focused and didn't get sidetracked by emails. He simply observed me, as though attempting to connect all the dots. For the first time in ages, a sense of guilt washed over me, feeling quite remorseful. Though Mark may have seemed distant, he remained my husband. What I was doing, what I was feeling, was not right. The following day, I met Jonathan for a cup of coffee. I promised myself it would be the final occasion. I simply had to bid farewell, to bring closure to whatever this was before it escalated into something more troubling. Yet, the moment I laid eyes on him, and he flashed that smile that made me feel like I was the sole focus of his universe, I realized it wouldn't be so straightforward. We found ourselves seated opposite one another in a serene cafe. For the first time, I allowed myself to utter the words I had been sidestepping. "This is wrong," I murmured, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Jonathan observed me intently for what felt like an eternity. Could it be? I took a deep breath. "I am in a marriage. I understand." His voice carried a serene quality, yet beneath it lingered an undercurrent of melancholy. "And I can no longer carry on with this," I continued. "This situation must come to an end." Jonathan reclined in his chair, releasing a slow breath. I wished to hold on to you tightly. My heart tightened at the thought of losing him as well. Yet, I had already sacrificed so much of my essence in this. "I need to mend my marriage," I murmured, mostly to myself rather than to him. He nodded, yet the disappointment was evident in his eyes. "I comprehend." And just like that, it came to an end. That was my impression, at the very least. Yet existence has a peculiar manner of ensuring you confront your errors. 2 days later, Mark faced me directly. He had observed the messages. He had accessed my phone without permission. "I placed my faith in you," he uttered, his voice trembling. "I believed we were merely experiencing a difficult moment. I believed we could resolve it." My eyes stung with the heat of unshed tears. "Mark, I cannot." He interrupted me. "Simply share the honest facts with me. Did you have feelings for him?" The reality weighed down on my heart. I was unaware of the answer. Did I truly love Jonathan? Or was it simply the way he made me feel that captivated me? I lingered for far too long. That moment of uncertainty was precisely what Mark required. He turned and left. In that instant, I understood I had shattered something beyond repair. We made an effort for some time. Counseling, deep discussions, commitments to improve. Yet, the harm had already been inflicted. Mark's gaze towards me shifted forever after that moment. No matter how deeply I wished to revert to the past, it was clear that such a return was impossible. Ultimately, we parted ways. It wasn't just one solitary error, but rather the culmination of all that had brought us to this point. Years of disregard, of misunderstandings, of feigning normalcy when all was not well. Jonathan and I never exchanged another word. At times, I find myself pondering whether he ever considers me. Should he ever ponder the possibilities of what might have unfolded? However, I refrain from lingering on it for an extended period. Ultimately, the most painful realization was not just the end of my marriage, but the fact that I had lost sight of who I truly was in the process. I was reluctant to cease.